Joining me now, Markos Moulitsas. He's, of course, founder of the Daily Kos. And Michael Steele. He's a former advisor to John Boehner and Mitt Romney. So it's interesting, when you look at both candidates, in some ways, one, not taking the virus seriously enough at all, and one, if there's a criticism might be, is he taking it too seriously, at least when it comes to campaigning? Markos, let me start with you. Is there any part of you that's nervous about the light Biden footprint when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to the door knocking, when it comes to this stuff? It is probably the only hole in the campaign infrastructure, which is obvious why it's there. It's due to the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little more worried, to be honest, about spending a lot more time in Georgia and Texas. And I'm somebody who's really gung-ho on expanding the map. But I also, if there's one thing that I'm still traumatized over 2016 was Hillary Clinton looking at states like Arizona without locking down Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So that's the one piece that has me a little worried. But like you said, he actually has plans to go back to those states in these last few days. So I'm a little less worried about it. And also, let's not forget, so many people have already voted. This is not a typical election as we've known them in the past.
Michael Steele, the question is the other way with the Trump campaign. I mean, you know, one of the things I said on Sunday is the October surprise may be that we're getting the third surge as Election Day comes. And the president seems to be insisting on making a huge push in the one region of the country that is experiencing a spike, and that's the Midwest. This may not end well.
So that was Chuck Todd yesterday on MSNBC, basically trying to both sides COVID seriousness, trying to suggest that, you know, maybe Joe Biden is taking COVID too seriously, Trump not seriously enough. Maybe we need to find somewhere to meet in the middle. You know, Trump is having these mega rallies that are violating masking and social distancing protocols, yet Joe Biden is, you know, having a lighter campaign schedule. You know, Chuck Todd doesn't quite, you know, say that, oh, he's hiding in his basement, but he basically makes that implication, saying that, like, oh, isn't Biden not doing enough to actually get out there and see the people? And I think this is a terrible argument, because you cannot both sides this issue. Certainly, there's a way you could ask a question about how Biden has shifted his campaign style to this type of crisis. And has he done enough? Have the Democrats perhaps explored a way to better intertwine safe campaigning with traditional campaigning? But to phrase it in the way that Biden and the Democrats and progressives and people like Fauci and scientists and everybody are taking this too seriously is absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And this is just one of the real problems you still see in mainstream media. You still see it. You're seeing less of it now, frankly. Media has sort of smartened up to how Trump sort of short-circuited how media worked back in 2016, but there's still this sense that media needs to be fair to both sides. And that is correct. Media should be fair insofar as it's possible to the various perspectives put in front of it. But being fair and trying to limit, because you can never be fully unbiased, but trying to limit your bias does not mean that you have to treat every proposition as equal or take every spectrum and suggest that the exact middle of that spectrum is the place to be at. You know, that's not what being a fair, neutral, open-minded journalist or interviewer is about. You do not have someone say, we want to welcome everyone and we want to ban an entire religion, and then say, well, maybe we need to only ban parts of religions, like as the middle point. That's not good enough. Saying you need to take something too seriously that saves lives, and saying somebody that's not taking it seriously enough and that 200,000 people have passed away and say, oh, maybe there's a point in the middle here, is absurd. 100% absurd. People like Chuck Todd are part of the problem because they're still acting under the assumption that the Republican Party is operating under good faith, and they're not. And that doesn't mean the Democrats are always operating under good faith, especially when the Democratic Party talks about the left, people to the left of the corporate Democrats. They rarely act in good faith. Look at how little good faith Bernie Sanders gets or AOC gets a lot of the time. But that's besides the point. They are at least sometimes operating in good faith, mainstream Democrats. The Republicans almost never are, historically and especially in the Trump era. And so to try to build this false equivalency is a disservice to your viewers, because what you are saying is somehow there's a middle ground here. There is no middle ground. Joe Biden, on taking this seriously, has generally done the right thing. It might not be perfect, but he is broadly correct. And there is no way to even compare that, even by asking this question, to Donald Trump's approach, which has been among the worst. I often, find that a lot of these hashtag fire X journalist hashtags are overblown. Like, often it just comes down to, a journalist on Fox said something mean about a conservative, I want them fired. Or a journalist on MSNBC was too nice to Bernie Sanders, like Chris Hayes, so I want him fired. But, Chuck Todd has been consistently awful at creating false equivalencies. I really do think it's time that MSNBC and NBC evaluate the prominent role they give him and ask themselves if he deserves it.